The Art of Gangsterism, Navigating the Game Without Fear, Control Mechanism G-Codex_as composed by ÆonOfAnuRA at care of D Nguyen powered by CTM. G-Codex_. Copyright and Intellectual Property Notice The Art of Gangsterism, Navigating the Game Without Fear Copyright C 2025 ÆonOfAnuRA care of D Nguyen all rights reserved. No part of this publication may be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted in any form or by any means, including photocopying, recording, or other electronic or mechanical methods, without the prior written permission of the copyright holder, except in the case of brief quotations embodied in critical reviews and certain other non-commercial uses permitted by copyright law. This book, including all original concepts, theories, structures, and terminologies presented within, is the intellectual property of the author. Any unauthorized reproduction, adaptation, or commercial use of the material without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. All trademarks, service marks, and product names mentioned in this book are the property of their respective owners. The author and publisher make no claim to them. For permissions, inquiries, or licensing requests, contact John D. Nguyen phone, CA1-604-600-8421 email, john999@icloud.com. 2. G-Codex_. Public disclaimer The insights, strategies, and methodologies presented in The Art of Gangsterism, Navigating the Game Without Fear are intended for informational and educational purposes only. The effectiveness of any concept discussed in this book is dependent on the reader's level of discipline, focus, and adherence to the principles outlined. Results will vary based on individual application, personal mindset, and situational variables. This book does not guarantee specific outcomes, nor does it serve as a substitute for professional advice in legal, financial, or psychological matters. The author assumes no responsibility for any decisions, actions, or consequences resulting from the application of the material presented. By engaging with this content, the reader acknowledges that success is determined by one's ability to operate within established control mechanisms, the rules, governance structures, and protocols that shape one's trajectory. Mastery of these mechanisms requires strategic awareness, adaptability, and self-discipline. Proceed with intent, understanding, and accountability. 3. G-Codex_. The 9 Rules of Foundation for the Game. Rule 1. Control the narrative. Master your mind before you master the world. Before you engage in any external conflict, master the battle within. The first rule of the game is the realization that every victory or defeat starts in the mind. You must control your thoughts, emotions, and actions to navigate the world without fear. This mental dominance will serve as the basis for every strategy you employ. The battlefield is won in the mind first. Rule 2. The strategy of foresight. Plan, don't react. War is not about reacting to challenges, it's about anticipating and planning for them. The second rule is to always prepare for every possible scenario. Study your environment, know your allies and enemies, and predict the future. Only when you are prepared for all eventualities will you be able to make the right moves at the right time. Success comes from foresight, not reaction. Rule 3. Master the flow of conflict. Escalate and de-escalate at will. Conflict is inevitable, but its course is malleable. You are the one who controls the intensity of every situation. Learn to escalate conflict when it serves your purpose and de-escalate it when it benefits you. The flow of conflict must be dictated by your will, not by external forces. Mastery of the emotional landscape is the key to controlling your opponents and outcomes. 4. G-Codex_. Rule 4. Focus on internal strength. The true power lies within. Your greatest power does not come from external sources, it comes from your inner being. To master the world, you must first master yourself. The strongest warriors are those who conquer their fears, their ego, and their deepest insecurities. Self-mastery is the foundation upon which every external victory is built. Rule 5. Cultivate balance. Power without peace is destruction. True mastery is not defined by the pursuit of endless power. The 5th rule emphasizes balance. You must wield power without losing your peace or sense of integrity. Power without self-control leads to self-destruction. Maintain peace within, and you will navigate any external challenge with confidence and grace. The balance between power and peace defines your true strength. Rule 6. Be relentless. Full engagement leads to full victory in the game of life. Half measures will not bring you victory. When you choose to fight, choose to give everything, your energy, focus, and commitment. Commitment to the cause and full engagement in the moment is the only way to guarantee a successful outcome. Relentlessly pursue victory with everything you have. G-Codex_. Rule 7. Legacy over glory. What you leave behind defines you. The 7th rule challenges you to look beyond your immediate desires and consider the legacy you want to leave. True power is not about instant gratification or personal accumulation, but about what you contribute to the future. Build a legacy of wisdom, influence, and impact, and your name will live on long after you're gone. Your actions today should be designed for tomorrow's benefit. Rule 8. Master the art of silence. Speak less, act more. Words are powerful, but silence is often more powerful. Control your speech, and speak only when it serves your purpose. Too many words give others an opportunity to read your intentions. Master the art of silence and speak only when your words will strike with purpose. Action should always outweigh words, and the loudest presence is often the one who says the least. Rule 9. Adapt to change. Flexibility is the key to survival. The world is constantly changing, and only those who adapt will survive. Flexibility is the final rule of the game. Learn to bend with the winds of change, adjust your strategies, and evolve with each challenge. The rigid will break, but the adaptable will thrive. Embrace change, learn from it, and evolve to meet every new circumstance that life throws your way. ÆonOfAnuRA. Chapter 1. The Code of the Streets, Philosophy of Power, the Desire for Power and Respect, the Art of Fearlessness. 7. Mastering the Code. #. Section 1. The Desire for Power and Respect. Experimental input. The need for dominance. Power is not just about control, it is about survival. In the streets, in business, in life, the one who commands respect dictates the rules. But respect is not given freely, it is earned through presence, action, and the ability to enforce one's will when necessary. The experiment begins with a question: what happens when a man refuses to submit to the expectations of the weak? When he carries himself as a force, demanding acknowledgement without asking for it. The desire is clear: to stand above, to be recognized as an authority, to exist beyond the reach of manipulation. To test this, one must enter a space where authority is challenged. How does the world react to someone who refuses to bow, refuses to hesitate? The streets, the boardroom, the social hierarchy, each environment presents a different battlefield, but the principle remains the same: only the strong dictate the flow of events. Conclusive output, the natural order of power. Power commands attention. When a man moves without hesitation, without looking for permission, the world responds. The probable outcome of adopting this philosophy is twofold: either one rises to a position of undeniable influence, or one provokes opposition from those threatened by true presence. The law of dominance is simple: respect is extracted, not requested. People instinctively recognize strength, whether in posture, speech, or action. A man who moves with confidence, who speaks with finality, who acts with decisiveness, will always stand apart. However, with power comes consequence. Enemies arise where power is concentrated. The moment a man stands above, others will attempt to pull him down. The test then shifts: can he maintain his position, or will he be crushed under the weight of his own ambition? 8. #. Personal experience. The first test of presence. I remember the first time I truly understood what it meant to demand respect without a word. It was in a room filled with men who saw me as an outsider, who expected me to shrink, to wait for permission to speak. But hesitation is an invitation for control. I sat back, observed, let my presence settle before I spoke. The moment my voice cut through the tension, I saw the shift. Eyes locked on me, waiting, reassessing. I didn't ask to be heard, I assumed my position, and the room adjusted accordingly. That was the moment I learned: the world only respects those who act like they own it. 9. #. Section 2. The Art of Fearlessness. Experimental input. Eliminating uncertainty. Fear is a weapon, both for and against those who understand its power. The weak submit to it. The strong wield it. But what happens when fear itself is erased? When a man moves without concern for consequence, without hesitation. The experiment begins with an exercise: navigating high-risk situations without allowing doubt to interfere. The desire is to become untouchable, not physically, but mentally. To enter any environment knowing that fear has no place, that decisions are final, and that presence alone shifts the balance of power. How does the world react to someone who moves without fear? What doors open? What threats emerge? The test is set. Conclusive output: the shift in perception. When a man walks without fear, he forces others to reconsider their own stance. The probable outcome of this experiment is transformation, from a participant to an orchestrator, from a target to an entity that cannot be ignored. Fearlessness changes dynamics. Those who operate on intimidation suddenly lose their edge. The absence of hesitation forces others to second-guess themselves. In this state, the world bends. People adjust their actions, words, and movements based on the presence of an individual who carries no doubt. However, fearlessness without intelligence is recklessness. The challenge becomes balance, knowing when to act, when to hold back, when to push forward. A reckless man is just another pawn in the game. A fearless strategist, however, rewrites the game itself. G Codex _ personal experience. Walking into the fire, I once walked into a situation where fear would have meant death, if not literal, then in reputation. The air was thick with unspoken warnings, but I refused to acknowledge them. I moved forward, head high, eyes steady, completely unshaken. The moment hesitation appears, control is lost. I saw it in the way they watched me, waiting for a crack, an opening. There was none. I spoke, acted, and left without a single moment of uncertainty. From that day forward, I was untouchable in that space. 11. G Codex _ Section 3, Mastering the Code. Experimental input, the final test of control power. Respect. Fearlessness. Each element of the code is a piece of a greater whole. But the final test is mastery, applying these principles in every aspect of life, not just in isolated moments. The desire is no longer survival or dominance. It is elevation. What happens when a man fully embraces the code, when his actions, words, and energy are fully aligned with power? The experiment now extends beyond the streets. How does this mindset translate to business, to leadership, to personal growth? Conclusive output, the evolution of a gangster. A true gangster is not just a street figure, he is an architect of reality. The probable outcome of mastery is complete control over self and environment. Where others react, he dictates. Where others falter, he moves with precision. This is the point where the game no longer controls him, he controls the game. Power is no longer something he chases, it is something he embodies. Respect is not earned through force, but through presence alone. Fearlessness is no longer a mask, but an unshakable truth. However, with this mastery comes a responsibility to either build or destroy. The final lesson in the code is choice. What does a man do once he has everything he sought? 12. G Codex _ personal experience, the turning point. There was a moment when I realized I had crossed the threshold, where I was no longer just navigating the game, but shaping it. It wasn't in a single action, but in the way people responded. They stopped challenging. They started following. The code was no longer something I had to enforce, it became something that enforced itself through me. At that point, I had a decision to make. Keep playing the same game, or evolve into something greater. That was the final lesson. Real power isn't just about winning. It's about deciding what happens after the victory. 13. G Codex _ Chapter 2, The Art of War, Strategy, Tactics, and Psychology. The aspiration for tactical mastery, the psychology of fear and control. 14. Winning the war before it begins. G Codex _ Section 1, The aspiration for tactical mastery. Experimental input, understanding the power of strategy. Raw strength is nothing without intelligence. The desire for power means nothing if one lacks the ability to outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast those who would seek to take it. The greatest warriors, the most successful leaders, and the most untouchable figures in history did not win through brute force alone, they won because they understood the game at a deeper level. The experiment begins with this question: what happens when a man moves not with emotion, but with calculation? When he no longer reacts, but anticipates? When he transforms every situation into a chessboard where he is always 3 moves ahead? The test is set: master the art of control through strategy. Instead of reacting to chaos, one must learn to orchestrate it. Instead of engaging in unnecessary battles, one must pick the right ones, at the right time, and always have an escape plan. The goal is simple: to win without fighting. Conclusive output, the psychology of the unpredictable. Those who operate from emotion are easily manipulated. Those who rely solely on force eventually fall to someone smarter. The probable outcome of this experiment is clear: the strategist always wins. When a man masters the psychology of war, he becomes untouchable in ways that cannot be measured by physical power alone. He learns to read people like open books, knowing their next move before they do. Control environments, shaping the battlefield before the fight even begins. Use unpredictability as a weapon, forcing others to second-guess their own decisions. However, there is a danger in strategy: overcalculation can lead to hesitation. The man who plots endlessly but never acts is just as weak as the one who moves recklessly. True mastery lies in the balance of thought and action. 15. G Codex _ personal experience. The day I stopped reacting, I remember the moment I realized the difference between playing checkers and playing chess. There was a situation where every instinct told me to strike, to react immediately, to show strength through action. But I waited. I watched. I let the opposition believe they had control. I studied not just what was being said, but what wasn't. The pauses. The hesitations. The false confidence covering insecurity. Then, when the moment was right, I spoke one sentence, not a threat, not an outburst, just a simple statement that shattered their entire position. They folded without a fight. That was the day I learned that true power is not in how loud you are, how strong you look, or how many battles you win. True power is in knowing which battles never need to be fought at all. 16. G-Codex_. Section 2. The Psychology of Fear and Control. Experimental input. Reversing the power of fear. Fear is the most powerful weapon in existence. The weak are controlled by it, while the strong understand how to use it. But the ultimate mastery comes when a man is able to reverse the power of fear, to strip it from his mind and project it outward instead. The test is as follows: what happens when fear is no longer a personal weakness, but a tool of influence? What changes when a man is no longer concerned with how others see him, but instead controls how they feel in his presence? The desire here is simple: to stand in any room and know, without question, that one's presence alone shifts the energy. Not through violence, not through arrogance, but through a deep, quiet certainty that forces others to adjust. Conclusive output: the transformation of presence. When a man no longer operates from fear, he begins to notice a shift in how the world responds to him. The probable outcome of this experiment is twofold. 1. He becomes an enigma. When people cannot predict a man, they fear him. 2. He forces others to reveal their true nature. Insecurity, weakness, or strength all rise to the surface in the presence of unwavering confidence. However, power must be wielded with precision. Fear used recklessly creates enemies faster than it creates loyalty. The goal is not to intimidate needlessly, but to command naturally. A man who truly understands control never has to raise his voice, never has to threaten. His presence alone is the warning. 17. G-Codex_. Personal experience. The silence that spoke louder than words. There was a moment when I realized that words were unnecessary. I sat in a room full of people trying to establish dominance, trying to prove something. I said nothing. I watched. The more I remained silent, the more the weak grew uncomfortable. They filled the silence with nervous laughter, unnecessary explanations, and attempts to pull me into their frame. I let them. And then, when I finally spoke, my words landed like a hammer. Because I had waited. Because I had let the room show me who was truly in control. I never had to explain my position after that day. 18. G-Codex_. Section 3. Winning the war before it begins. Experimental input. Setting the battlefield. The final lesson in the art of war is this: every battle is won or lost before it is ever fought. The desire is no longer to engage in endless conflicts, but to shape reality so that victory is inevitable. This means controlling the environment, setting the stage before anyone realizes it's a stage. The perception, crafting how others see you before they meet you. The narrative, dictating the story before anyone else has a chance to. The experiment is this: what happens when a man ensures that every situation he enters is already in his favor? Instead of adapting, he is the one who forces adaptation in others. Conclusive output: the unseen hand of power. When a man orchestrates reality, he no longer needs to fight, he only needs to watch things unfold according to his design. The probable outcome of this experiment is absolute influence. The ones who think they are in control are actually following the script. The ones who challenge are only fighting against shadows. The ones who seek power too late realize they are already in checkmate. But this level of mastery comes with a single risk: the strategist must never become arrogant. The moment he believes himself invincible, he stops seeing the pieces moving against him. 19. G-Codex_. Personal experience. The moment I saw the whole board, there was a time when I thought winning meant being the loudest, the most feared, the most aggressive. But the day I stopped reacting and started setting the battlefield, everything changed. I walked into situations already knowing how they would end. I spoke only when I knew my words would land. I moved in ways that forced others to play into my strategy. And then I realized I wasn't playing the game anymore. I was the game. 20. G-Codex_. Chapter 3. The Mask of the Gangster, Identity and Reinvention. The Ambition for Adaptability and Control. The Power of Reinvention. 21. The Duality of the Mask. G-Codex_. Section 1. The Ambition for Adaptability and Control. Experimental input. Crafting a persona. The world is a stage, and every man plays a role. But the weak are stuck with the identity they were given, while the strong become who they need to be. The desire is clear: to create an identity that commands respect, influence, and control. Not a mask of deception, but a carefully crafted projection of power, a persona that bends reality to one's will. The experiment begins with a question: what happens when identity is no longer a limitation, but a weapon? If a man reinvents himself, reshaping his appearance, his energy, his presence, what changes? How does the world react to someone who has intentionally designed himself for power? The test is set to become more than just a name, but a force. Conclusive output, the evolution of perception. A man who controls his own identity controls how others interact with him. The probable outcome of this experiment is transformation. 1. He becomes untouchable. People struggle to challenge someone they cannot fully define. 2. He dictates the terms. If he shapes his own legend, others follow the narrative he creates. 3. He gains access. The right identity opens doors that brute force never could. But identity is a double-edged sword. If a man forgets that he is the architect, he becomes a prisoner of his own creation. The mask must always serve the man, never the other way around. 22. G-Codex_ Personal experience, becoming the myth. I remember the day I stopped being just a name. I walked into places where I was supposed to be unknown, yet people whispered my reputation before I even spoke. The power wasn't in what I had done, it was in what they believed I had done. I had learned to craft perception, to let silence build curiosity, to make my presence feel larger than life. From that moment, I was no longer just playing the game. I became the story they told. 23. G-Codex_. Section 2. The power of reinvention. Experimental input, destroying the old self to evolve. A man must be willing to kill who he used to be. The experiment is as follows. What happens when a man completely sheds his past identity and steps into something new? When he no longer carries the weaknesses, the doubts, the hesitations of his former self. The desire is simple, total reinvention. Not just in appearance, but in thought, in action, in energy. How does the world respond to someone who is no longer bound by the expectations of his past? What opportunities arise when a man no longer carries the weight of his former limitations? Conclusive output, the freedom of transformation. When a man rebuilds himself, he steps outside the control of those who once thought they knew him. The probable outcome of this experiment is complete liberation. He is no longer predictable. No one can use his past against him. He creates new opportunities. The world responds to who he is now, not who he was before. He becomes limitless. The past is no longer a weight, it is fuel. However, reinvention must be intentional. A man who changes without direction is just running from himself. True power comes from choosing what to become, not just escaping what was. 24. G-Codex_. Personal experience, burning the old name. There was a moment when I realized my past was a chain. Not because I was weak, but because others refused to see me as anything else. So I let the old version of me die. I disappeared, rebuilt, and returned as someone they could no longer define. The moment they saw me again, they knew this was not the same man. From that day forward, I was exactly who I chose to be. 25. G-Codex_. Section 3. The duality of the mask. Experimental input, mastering both sides. The final lesson in identity is balance. The mask is a weapon, but if a man loses himself in the persona, he becomes just another illusion. The desire is no longer just reinvention, it is mastery over both the mask and the man behind it. The experiment is this: what happens when a man learns to switch between identities at will? To be feared in one moment, charismatic in the next? To command a room with intensity, yet disappear when necessary? How does true power shift when a man is no longer just one thing, but everything he needs to be? Conclusive output, the art of the chameleon. A true gangster, a true strategist, a true master of identity, he is never trapped in one form. The probable outcome of this experiment is ultimate control. He moves between worlds effortlessly. Street, corporate, high society, each one is just another game. He never reveals his full hand. People only see what he allows them to see. He is never out of place. No matter the situation, he adapts instantly. But this mastery comes with a final warning: a man who loses himself in his own masks forgets which version is real. The strongest warriors, the greatest minds, the most powerful figures all understand this. The mask is a tool, but the man is the power. 26. G-Codex_. Personal experience, walking between worlds. There was a time when I thought I had to pick a side. Be feared or be loved. Be ruthless or be respected. Be in the streets or be in the boardroom. Then I realized the truth: I never had to choose. One day, I sat across from men in suits, speaking their language, playing their game. The next, I was in a place where power moved differently, yet I was just as at home. I learned to adapt, to shift, to be exactly who I needed to be at any moment. From that point on, the world was no longer something I had to navigate. It became something I controlled. 27. Chapter 4, Wealth and Power, the Business of the Underworld, the Need for Unbreakable Alliances, the Mechanics of Betrayal. 28. Controlling Loyalty Through Influence. Section 1, The Need for Unbreakable Alliances. Experimental Input, Testing the Foundations of Loyalty. Loyalty is the most valuable currency in any world where power is at play. But true loyalty is rare. Most relationships are built on convenience, fear, or opportunity rather than genuine trust. The desire is clear, to build a network of unbreakable alliances, where trust is absolute, and betrayal is unthinkable. The experiment begins with a question: what happens when loyalty is treated as an investment rather than an expectation? Instead of assuming trust, one must test it. Instead of giving loyalty blindly, one must make it something that is earned, protected, and enforced. The test is set: who remains when there is nothing left to gain? Conclusive output: the nature of true loyalty. Through this experiment, a man quickly learns a harsh reality: most people will betray when the right pressure is applied. The probable outcome is a refined understanding of trust. 1. Loyalty is tested in loss, not gain. When the rewards disappear, true alliances reveal themselves. 2. Trust must be built on action, not words. A man's history tells the truth, not his promises. 3. The strongest bonds are formed through shared trials. When two men survive fire together, their loyalty is forged in steel. However, loyalty is a double-edged sword. If a man trusts too easily, he is destroyed. If he trusts no one, he isolates himself. The key is balance, building a tight, selective circle while always remaining aware of human nature. 29. Personal experience. The moment I saw true loyalty, I once watched a man take a fall that wasn't his, holding the weight of another's mistakes without hesitation. No excuses, no blame, just a silent understanding of the code that bound him. Later, when the tables turned, the same loyalty was returned tenfold. That day, I learned the difference between loyalty built on words and loyalty built on sacrifice. Only the second kind matters. 30. Section 2, The Mechanics of Betrayal. Experimental Input, Identifying the Fault Lines. Every betrayal starts long before it happens. The signs are there: the hesitations, the inconsistencies, the shifting energy. The desire now shifts from building loyalty to detecting betrayal before it strikes. The experiment is this: what happens when betrayal is treated as a predictable pattern rather than a surprise? If a man studies behavior, learns to read the small shifts in tone, body language, and decision-making, can he prevent deception before it takes form? Conclusive output: the betrayal algorithm. Betrayal follows a formula. The probable outcome of this experiment is early detection and strategic counteraction. Lies start small. A man who breaks his word in minor things will do so in major things. Greed reveals cracks. Watch how a man acts when money is on the table. Fear breeds disloyalty. The weak betray to save themselves, test their courage before they're ever in a position to switch sides. But the greatest lesson is this: a betrayal always comes with a warning, most just refuse to see it. 31. Personal experience. Seeing the knife before it struck. There was a time when I trusted a man based on history rather than present reality. The moment I sensed the shift, I ignored it. The energy was different, the conversations weren't the same, but I convinced myself it was paranoia. Until the betrayal came. That day, I learned, the feeling is always right. The mistake isn't seeing betrayal coming, it's refusing to accept it before it's too late. 32. Section 3, Controlling Loyalty Through Influence. Experimental Input, The Art of Influence. Loyalty can be gained through fear, respect, love, or necessity. The strongest leaders understand how to balance all four. The final experiment is this: what happens when loyalty is no longer expected, but engineered? If a man can make himself indispensable, if he can become the one others need, does loyalty become automatic? Conclusive output: the power of being needed. The probable outcome of this experiment is a loyalty that is not forced, but natural. People follow those who elevate them. If a man builds his circle up, their loyalty becomes a matter of survival. Fear fades, investment lasts. Those who are forced into loyalty eventually turn. Those who are given opportunity willingly stay. The strongest influence is quiet. The one who moves in the background, who controls without commanding, who lets others believe they are choosing, he holds the real power. But there is a warning here: if loyalty is built only on what one provides, it can be lost when those resources disappear. True power comes from influence that transcends material value. 33. Personal experience. When loyalty became unspoken, I stopped asking for loyalty. Instead, I made sure that when I moved, others wanted to move with me. When I won, those around me won. When I built, they built too. Over time, the need to question loyalty disappeared. It was no longer about words, it was about actions, shared victories, and a silent understanding that betrayal would cost more than it was worth. 34. G-Codex_. Chapter 5. The Law of Fearlessness, Walking Without Hesitation. The Wish for Strategic Silence. The Power of Moving Unseen. 35. Controlling Information as a Weapon. G-Codex_. Section 1. The Wish for Strategic Silence. Experimental Input. The art of saying less. Power is often mistaken for volume. Many believe the loudest man in the room holds control. But the truth is the opposite. The more a man speaks, the more he gives away. The desire in this experiment is clear, to master silence as a weapon, a shield, and a source of control. The test begins with restraint. What happens when a man speaks only when necessary? What shifts when he observes before acting, when he lets others reveal their intentions first? Conclusive output. Silence as control. The probable outcome of this experiment is a shift in dynamics. 1. He becomes unpredictable. If no one knows his thoughts, no one can counter his moves. 2. He forces others to fill the space. People fear silence, and in that discomfort, they reveal their own strategies. 3. He commands respect. A man who speaks with precision is listened to when he finally does. But silence must be intentional. If it is mistaken for weakness, it loses its power. The key is balance, speaking only when the words serve a purpose. 36. G-Codex_. Personal experience. The day I stopped talking first, there was a time when I felt the need to prove myself through words, to explain, to justify, to make my position clear. Then I tested a new approach. I let the silence do the work. In negotiations, in confrontations, in alliances, I spoke last. I watched as people rushed to fill the void, exposing their plans, their fears, their motivations. That was the moment I realized, the less I spoke, the more I controlled. 37. G-Codex_. Section 2. The Power of Moving Unseen. Experimental Input. The shadow strategy. Power moves differently in the dark. The strongest players are the ones you never see coming. The experiment is this: what happens when a man removes his presence from unnecessary attention? Instead of seeking validation, instead of craving recognition, he shifts to operating in the background. If no one knows his moves, his enemies cannot counter them. If his name is spoken in whispers rather than headlines, his influence grows beyond his presence. Conclusive output. The advantage of being untraceable. The probable outcome of this experiment is ultimate freedom. He cannot be targeted. If no one knows where the power truly lies, it cannot be attacked. He controls perception. The strongest myth is the one with just enough truth to make it real. He outlasts those who burn out. The loud ones attract too much attention, they rise fast and fall harder. But moving in shadows requires patience and discipline. The ego must be checked. A man who cannot stand being unseen will never master true control. 38. G-Codex_. Personal experience. The power of not being there. I watched as others made themselves the center of attention, believing power came from being in the spotlight. I chose the opposite route. I let my moves speak without attaching my name to them. The results were undeniable. I was in control, yet rarely a target. In the end, the loudest voices became cautionary tales. I remained exactly where I wanted to be, present, but invisible. 39. G-Codex_. Section 3. Controlling Information as a Weapon. Experimental Input. The information game. Words are currency. The right information in the right hands creates power. The wrong information in the wrong hands creates vulnerability. The experiment is simple. What happens when a man controls the flow of information around him? Instead of revealing everything, he dictates who knows what, and when. What shifts when he feeds misinformation, when he uses silence as a smokescreen, when he ensures that no one ever has the full picture except him? Conclusive output. The mastery of influence. The probable outcome of this experiment is complete dominance over the narrative. People move based on what they believe. If one controls belief, he controls action. Disinformation creates confusion. When enemies think they know his next step, but they are wrong, they weaken themselves. Knowledge becomes leverage. Those who rely on his information become dependent on him. But information must be used wisely. If deception is discovered, credibility is lost. The strongest power is built on truths that are selectively revealed, not reckless lies. XL. G-Codex_. Personal experience. Feeding the right truths. There was a time when I let people assume what they wanted about me. Some thought I was one thing, others thought I was another. I never corrected them. Instead, I watched as their assumptions became their own limitations. They prepared for battles that never came, focused on shadows while I moved in plain sight. That was when I understood, the most dangerous thing in the world is an enemy who believes they know everything. XLI.G Codex _ Chapter 6, The Edge of Chaos, Violence, Consequence, and the Path Forward. The Hunger for Strategic Superiority, Mastery and Conflict. 42. The Craving for Unstoppable Victory. G Codex _ Section 1, The Hunger for Strategic Superiority. Experimental Input. Understanding the battlefield. War is not just fought on physical terrain, but in the mind. The true battle is fought with strategy, foresight, and the ability to control the narrative. The desire here is to understand the nature of conflict, not as a chaotic storm, but as a calculated, predictable force. The test begins with observation. What happens when a man approaches conflict not with brute force, but with a calm, strategic mind? Instead of reacting with emotion or haste, the challenge is to first observe the situation, the players, and the terrain. What does the landscape of power look like before the first move is made? The aim is clear, to predict the outcome, not based on aggression, but on intelligence and preparation. Conclusive output. The power of planning. The probable outcome of this experiment is a refined understanding of conflict. 1. Preparation outweighs aggression. The most successful warriors are those who know every variable before they engage. 2. Know your enemy better than they know themselves. A man who can predict his enemy's moves can exploit weaknesses before they even appear. 3. Victory is a mental game first. Battles are won with foresight, not just with weapons. However, the caveat is that perfect knowledge does not guarantee victory, but it provides an undeniable advantage. Strategy is about making the right move at the right time, and sometimes that means waiting for the perfect moment to strike. 43. G Codex _ Personal experience. The first battle I won in my mind. I recall the first time I entered into a confrontation I didn't expect to win. There were too many forces stacked against me. But instead of rushing in, I took a step back and studied my surroundings. I identified the key players, understood the weaknesses of each, and waited for the right moment. When the time came, I made my move, and the battle was over before it even began. That was when I understood, the greatest victories come from knowing when to wait, and when to strike. 44. G Codex _ Section 2, Mastery and Conflict. Experimental Input. Escalating or de-escalating conflict. Conflict is an inevitable part of life. It will always emerge. The desire here is to experiment with escalation and de-escalation techniques to understand their true power. The test begins with choices. What happens when a man deliberately escalates or de-escalates conflict to shift the power dynamic? Instead of responding immediately with force or words, he manipulates the tension, bringing it down when it suits him, and intensifying it when it serves his greater plan. The goal is clear, to control the momentum of a conflict, directing its course like a river to one's advantage. Conclusive output. Controlling the flow of conflict. The probable outcome of this experiment is a more nuanced approach to power dynamics. The escalation builds control. By reducing the tension, a man positions himself as the calm in the storm, creating trust and unpredictability. Escalation can force your enemy's hand. If a man escalates conflict at the right time, he forces his opponent to respond, revealing weaknesses or forcing mistakes. Conflict resolution is a tool, not a goal. The ultimate goal of any conflict is not to fight forever, but to achieve victory without prolonged warfare. But remember, the key is timing. Escalating too soon leads to rash actions, while de-escalating at the wrong moment allows the opponent to take control. 45. G Codex _ Personal experience. De-escalating for greater power. I was once caught in a conflict where both sides were ready to explode. It could have been a long, drawn-out fight, with nothing to gain. Instead, I took a breath and calmed the situation down. I shifted the power dynamics by showing my opponent that I was in control of the emotional landscape. The result? They trusted me to guide the situation, and the conflict dissipated without ever turning into a war. That day, I realized, control the emotional intensity and you control the game. 46. G Codex _ Section 3, The Craving for Unstoppable Victory. Experimental Input. The full engagement. Victory is the ultimate goal of any conflict. The desire is to understand how to achieve unstoppable victory, where all factors work in one's favor, and the outcome is assured. The test begins with immersion. What happens when a man commits to the full engagement of conflict, no longer holding anything back? Instead of approaching with hesitation or fear, he gives everything, his energy, his resources, and his resolve. What happens when every move is aligned with victory, and there is no room for doubt or retreat? The aim is clear, to engage fully, without reservation, and achieve absolute victory. Conclusive output. Unyielding victory. The probable outcome of this experiment is undeniable domination. Full commitment leads to confidence. When there is no retreat, no second guessing, every action becomes aligned with the goal. Victory is about momentum. Those who are fully engaged, who move with purpose and unshakable resolve, will inevitably wear down opposition. There is no victory without sacrifice. To win, a man must be willing to lose something. Only those who are willing to give it all, and give it all without hesitation, can claim true victory. But beware, full engagement requires discernment. There are times when holding back a little can save a man from unnecessary risks. The key is knowing when to give everything, and when to hold a few cards in reserve. 47. G-Codex_ Personal experience. When I gave everything, there was a time when I fought for something that mattered deeply. I knew there was no other option but to win. I committed fully, leaving nothing behind, and the outcome was clear. My energy was poured into every action, every thought, and every strategy. In the end, my victory wasn't just assured, it was inevitable. That day, I understood, victory is inevitable when you no longer entertain failure. 48. G-Codex_. Chapter 7, The Last Boss, Mastering the Game and Leaving a Legacy. The Passion for Ultimate Mastery, Longing for Balance Between Power and Peace. 49. Yearning to Leave a Legacy Beyond the Battlefield. G-Codex_. Section 1, The Passion for Ultimate Mastery. Experimental Input, the desire for total control. The last boss is not an external entity, it is a representation of the final hurdle one must overcome to truly master themselves and the world around them. The desire here is to break down this final challenge, to understand the ultimate power of self-mastery. The test begins with an inward journey. What happens when a man faces the deepest part of his psyche, unflinching in the face of his own darkness? Instead of focusing on outside enemies, the challenge is to confront and control the inner chaos, the emotions, the instincts, and the ego that arise in moments of doubt. What if every weakness could be turned into a strength? What if every fear could be overcome with sheer will? Conclusive output, the unstoppable force of self-control. The probable outcome of this experiment is a transformation that unlocks a new level of power. 1. Self-mastery is the key to mastery of the world. When you control your own thoughts, actions, and emotions, you are free to navigate any external challenge with precision and purpose. 2. The inner battle defines the outer battle. No enemy can break you if you have conquered your own inner demons. 3. True power comes from the ability to remain undistracted by external forces. The world is chaotic. True power is the ability to remain focused, unaffected, and unshaken by anything that attempts to knock you off course. But the caveat is that this journey of mastery requires constant vigilance. It is not enough to win once. Mastery must be maintained through perpetual self-awareness and discipline. G-Codex_. Personal experience. The moment I conquered myself, I had reached a point where external battles became insignificant. I had fought my way through conflict, but the hardest battle was always with myself. My greatest fears, doubts, and temptations surfaced like monsters in the dark. It was during a moment of pure internal chaos that I finally understood the power of self-mastery. By facing my own weakness head-on, I was able to turn them into my strongest assets. From that moment, nothing could shake me, not the opinions of others, not failure, not fear. I had conquered the hardest enemy there is, myself. Lee, G-Codex_. Section 2, Longing for Balance Between Power and Peace. Experimental Input, Power without corruption. In the pursuit of power, one may encounter the temptation to let power corrupt. The desire here is to explore the balance between achieving great power while remaining grounded in peace and integrity. The test begins with examining what happens when power is gained but is not allowed to distort the character of the individual. How does a man retain his clarity, focus, and sense of purpose while amassing influence, wealth, and control? The challenge lies in maintaining one's core principles while navigating the many distractions and temptations that come with power. How does one stay true to their vision without being consumed by external rewards or the ego's demand for validation? Conclusive output, true power resides in balance. The probable outcome of this experiment is the realization that true power does not corrupt when it is wielded with wisdom and self-discipline. Power without peace leads to destruction. A man who is consumed by his desire for power will eventually find himself alone, surrounded by enemies, and distant from his own peace. Balance creates sustainability. The greatest leaders are those who understand that power must be tempered with a sense of responsibility, compassion, and self-awareness. True power is internal, not external. The most powerful individuals are those who are at peace within themselves. Their power does not come from dominating others, but from having the inner strength to inspire, lead, and uplift. But achieving this balance requires constant self-reflection. It is easy to lose track when faced with the allure of external success. The key is to stay rooted in your true self, never letting power define you. 52. G-Codex_. Personal experience, balancing power with peace. There was a point when my ambition began to cloud my judgment. The more I gained, the more I wanted power, control, influence. It felt endless. It was then that I realized true power is found in peace, not in possession. I had to reconnect with my core values, understanding that my worth was not tied to the things I could acquire, but to the person I was becoming. Once I found this balance, I became unstoppable, not because I had all the external power, but because I had inner peace that no one could take from me. 53. G-Codex_. Section 3. Yearning to leave a legacy beyond the battlefield. Experimental input. Legacy beyond conflict. The last boss is not simply about overcoming the self or mastering power, it's about creating something that endures, leaving a legacy that transcends time, conflict, and individual achievement. The test begins with considering what happens when a man pursues a purpose greater than his own life. How can one create something that not only outlasts their personal struggles but continues to inspire and influence long after they are gone? The challenge is to step beyond the individual and consider the impact on future generations. How can one's wisdom, experiences, and achievements be crafted into a legacy that has a far-reaching effect on the world? Conclusive output. Legacy as the true measure of power. The probable outcome of this experiment is the understanding that true power is not measured by what is accomplished in one's lifetime, but by what remains after they have passed. Legacy is built on the foundation of wisdom and service. It is not enough to achieve power for the sake of self-glorification. True legacy is created by giving back, by teaching, and by leaving a blueprint for others to follow. A lasting legacy transcends material success. The greatest leaders are remembered not for their wealth or achievements, but for how they transformed others and created lasting change. To leave a legacy, a man must live with intention. Every move, every choice, and every action should be taken with the awareness that it contributes to something greater than the individual. But legacy is never guaranteed. It is the result of intentional, meaningful work that stands the test of time. It requires a deep sense of purpose and an understanding that your actions have consequences beyond the moment. Live. G-Codex_. Personal experience, building a legacy beyond the now. I had always focused on the here and now, success, power, and achievement. But there came a moment when I realized that none of it would matter if I didn't leave something behind. I began to invest in others, to pass on what I had learned, and to craft a purpose that was about something bigger than my own ambitions. In doing so, I began to build a legacy, one that would last far beyond my own life. I understood, the true measure of power is not what you take with you, but what you leave behind. LV. G-Codex_. The plan checklist, 9 things you must prepare for navigation. 1. Mental fortitude. Preparation. Cultivate mental discipline and resilience. The world will challenge you, but you must remain unshaken and unyielding in the face of adversity. Action. Engage in daily practices like meditation, journaling, or affirmations to strengthen your mind. Train yourself to think critically and stay calm under pressure. 2. Mastery of self-preparation. Your greatest challenge is not the world, but the battle within. You must master your emotions, impulses, and ego. Action. Engage in self-reflection, analyze your weaknesses, and develop strategies to transform them into strengths. Understand your core values and align your actions with them. 3. Clear vision and purpose. Preparation. Develop a clear, unshakable vision for your life. Know exactly what you want to achieve and why. Action. Write down your goals, break them into smaller, actionable steps, and create a vision board or a mission statement that keeps you focused. 4. Unrelenting focus. Preparation. The world is full of distractions. You must maintain an unwavering focus on your goals. Action. Identify distractions in your life and minimize them. Create systems to keep your time and energy dedicated to what matters most. Regularly assess whether your actions align with your long-term vision. 5. Emotional intelligence. Preparation. To navigate the world without fear, you must understand and control your emotions as well as those of others. Action. Practice empathy, active listening, and conflict resolution. Learn to regulate your emotions, especially in challenging situations, and understand how others' emotions affect the dynamics around you. LVI. G-Codex_. 6. Resilience in the face of adversity. Preparation. Life will test you with failure, betrayal, and hardship. You must build the resilience to stand strong when faced with these challenges. Action. Develop a mindset of persistence and learn from setbacks. Cultivate grit through small daily challenges that test your resolve and push you beyond your comfort zone. 7. Strategic planning. Preparation. You must think ahead and anticipate obstacles, crafting detailed plans for success while remaining adaptable when things go off course. Action: develop a long-term strategy for each area of your life, career, relationships, personal growth, and adjust it as you encounter new information or obstacles. Always have a backup plan. 8. Inner peace and balance. Preparation: the pursuit of power without inner peace is self-destructive. You must find balance between action and reflection, power and peace. Action: dedicate time each day for mindfulness practices like meditation, exercise, or quiet reflection. Create routines that help you stay grounded, regardless of external chaos. 9. Legacy mindset. Preparation: focus on creating something that outlives you, your legacy. The impact you make today should ripple through time, influencing those who follow in your footsteps. Action: regularly assess whether your actions are contributing to a greater good or building something that lasts. Invest time in mentoring others and leaving behind a blueprint that will serve future generations. Conclusion: these 9 steps are your guide to navigating the world with no fear. They encompass the mental, emotional, and strategic preparation needed to rise to your greatest potential. The more diligently you prepare, the greater your chances of success. 57. G Codex _